seems that we have.
Kurt, you ready over there? Yes. Okay.
Cool. So, yeah, calling the meeting to order, I think.
And then
And-
I'll read my thing and then you go into.
You read Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. To minimize distractions during the meeting, please silence your cell phones. If you are attending virtually, please ensure you are muted and your video is off when you are not actively participating in the meeting. The city reserves the right to turn videos off or mute participants. When the chair calls for public comment, please approach the podium for those people inside to indicate you wish to speak. Virtual participants should use their raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand up raised until you are called on. The primary format for accessing or participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored. If you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please state your name and zip code before speaking. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes. And I'll turn it back over to the chair, Lisa Hallberg.
Yeah, so welcome, everybody. I do not have a copy of the agenda in front of me. Thank you, I apologize. I'm gonna, so our first item is, approving the minutes from last month. Do I have a motion to, or any comments on the minutes? Prior to asking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve last month's
All right, any
minutes.
second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And those are approved. Aye. So, and do we have any public comment here today?
I will say we did have the email that was submitted on the agenda
Okay.
that we had, and it's on there. And I did forward it on to staff as I sent. I know there were some people on that email that we did have.
Yeah.
And I did send it on, and I think Lindsay followed up with the individual, so.
Good deal.
so.
And if I recall, that was regarding staffing at the pool.
Hours and that
Yeah.
type of stuff, yeah.
Wonderful. All right, so then our main agenda items would be, number one is to review and discuss the Parks, Rec, and Culture 2025 Comprehensive Master Plan, which you do have copies of.
Okay, well, I don't know that you necessarily have copies of that.
Or the,
What we sent it attached in the agenda, if we need to refer to it. But what I also attached was the updated executive summary after our meeting last month, after we gave an opportunity for both this board and the Cultural Arts Commission about a couple of weeks to go back in and review it, and let us know if they had any feedback, any additional concerns. And after about those 2 weeks period, we did not get any feedback in either positive or negative, but no feedback during that time. So we would like to propose again, based on last month's presentation, that the board consider recommending this to the commission for acceptance. Again, acceptance being there is no policy or financial commitments at the time of acceptance, rather accepting the master plan in its full as a document that will guide us in decision-making over the next several years, within 5 or 10 years, with a list of improvements that, let me see, what they cover basically is a real good evaluation of our current system, park system, facilities. It tells us what the needs are within our facilities, identifies them by location, by priorities. It talks about our programming and recommendations based on both feedback from the public in the community as well as national trends and where they're heading. talks about art and culture and how to integrate it into the fabric of both our department and into the city. And it creates an action plan with deliverables and objectives and tasks to complete in order to make our program offerings and our facilities sustainable. And in addition to that, it also talks about funding and revenue sources that we can consider as we go into these, especially as we go into these times of budget constraints and budget reductions over the next several months. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the request here is if everybody's had an opportunity now to look over that master plan after last week's presentation, is to move forward to recommending this. I will say the plan was after this week was to go to the commission for their acceptance if that's what the board approves. But we also had to go still through the art commission on Wednesday, and the status of that meeting is unknown at this point because of potential snow. So the date of next week might change if we can't get it through that process by Wednesday, which is still even a tight turnaround. But this would be the first of the two approvals to move it to the full commission. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about it, and see if there were any questions that we can answer. We do have the consultants online if you have any questions that they can answer or clarify anything between last month and today. And thank you, PJ and Leon for joining. I can't tell who else is here, but so anyway, I want to throw it back to you guys
Jasmine
now.
are both there.
John has a
Okay.
question.
Yeah,
Well,
I have a really important point here, which is, I'm joking. On page 9 of the executive summary, there's a repeat sentence.
Okay. We thought we caught all of those, but okay.
Oh, okay.
We can edit that for. Porter pointed that out. You're a little redundant. I'm like, okay, so thank you. I guess I just want to offer for PJ or Leon, if you have anything else that you'd like to add while you're online. I don't want you to feel like you don't have an opportunity to speak here. If you have anything to add.
No, I don't. Leon or Jasmine, do you have anything? I think we've been through it all.
I don't.
Numerous times, but happy to answer any questions.
I have a question of whether my question is appropriate. Since the document is so extensive, it's hard for me to get a feel for what the staff leadership thinks are maybe 3 or 4 of the main changes in emphasis, if there are any, or things that you're excited about. Is that even an appropriate question at this time?
sure.
I think it is.
I think it's an appropriate.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what's in here that we want to make sure we know about in terms of any changes in direction? We've talked about the financial stuff, but other than that, are there changes in the organization, changes in the programming, changes in the facilities that are top of mind as being the most significant parts of the master plan?
And I can answer it. I think this would be a very different conversation as far as what, and I think the master plan lends itself to this, because what we have heard is that there's no big, shiny object here saying do this and do this, and this will be the best parks and recreation system in the country or in the region. But what it does gives us is the ability to follow through with a lot of the recommendations there that, that we can realistically achieve potentially over the next few years with a declining budget. And that, I think, is what the value of this is stating we have an assessment of our facilities, our park systems. These are the things that are important to the community, and we'd like to align those as we go through this time of reduction. And I mean, I can't state it too often that this will be a time of rolling back some service levels. And what this will do is those things that we continue to keep as important to the community, we can point to, prioritize in a transparent manner, rather than we're going to shift anything at this point. And I will say honestly that if this were that type of master plan where, you know, the city is going to excel on the backs of parks and recreation, that it would probably sit unused for the next few years, because we're not in the era of growth and changing. We're in the era of being more responsible with the money that we have. We're in the era of making sure that we're equitable in our programming, that we are prioritizing the programs that we have in a way that whatever we end up offering has the biggest impact. So I think that really is how we will intentionally use this master plan over the next few years, especially as we're looking at funding sources. They're not all on the backs of of the citizens or of the residents or the taxpayers. There are other options that once we have some level of service level reduction, is how do we grow it now, right? I think there's an era of right sizing. It's what we're hearing from the community, and again, that's what we'll talk about next in the next agenda item. And then it gives us opportunities to grow from there once we know what our resources are truly. Because right now, even organizationally, when they did that's going to look somewhat different, just out of necessity. So I hope I'm answering your question of what is the most exciting thing. It's really about maybe a playbook to help us guide us through these next years in an intentional way that we is documented and gives us a way of prioritizing the park system, that parks and recreation system and cultural system over the next few years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question for Luis. Luis, have you, I assume that in your previous jobs that you've worked with master plans, and can you tell us what you've learned from working with, I guess, different kinds of master plans in the past, and what you learn, what you want to make sure that we do, and what you want to try to avoid?
Well, I've done both I've worked with both cultural master plans as well as parks and recreation master plans. And I think the most important thing that we can do, and I've mentioned this before, is use it as a tool to create an annual plan that communicates to the community what we're doing. So not just to the community, but to our employees, to our work groups. And we use it as a tool to prioritize among our staff and teams, understanding what our capacities are, but really use it rather than, again, I think the comments I heard, though, there's nothing really big or visionary. I think that's always good, but I don't know that Lawrence has necessarily the appetite right now for something big. And so I think the most important thing we can do is focus in on an annual plan that points to that, and we're able to communicate that to the board, to the commission, to the public, and to our staff, that this is what how we're going to use this tool, right? And it is, it's succession, I think. We have enough information here to get us through, years of tasks, and initiatives and reprioritizations. And so I think that's what it is. It's about really defining what you can achieve within a certain amount of time, and then continue to report on that progress as you go through that plan to make sure that it's not just sitting
Right.
with some pipe dreams that can never be achieved.
I have a question. This may be addressed to Leon or to one of his staff members. And it may be in the summary, it may be in that document someplace. But I know you do these all over the country. You've done this for a very long time. What did you find that we do extremely well? And then on the other side of that is, what are we lacking? What do we need to do? I mean, just briefly. It doesn't have to be anything long.
Yeah.
Because I know we do
Well, you got an-
things.
You have an extensive trail system that's very incredible. And it's like you have 10 times more than the national average in trail miles. I mean, that's unheard of. It's probably the best in the country. Okay. Second is that you have an abundance of indoor recreation space. You're almost double the amount of indoor recreation space for a city your size, which is really great. I mean, both of those are awesome. You're really, in terms of sports fields, you're at a really good level in terms of meeting best practices in all of your game fields, in terms of space and how that gets done. I think adding arts as an element broadens your perspective of how you want to, how the public basically sees you and brings in a whole new audience. I think that those are the big things in my mind that are really spectacular that the city should be very proud of. Areas that you need obviously some improvements in is I don't think you're as balanced. And Louise just basically said this, you're not as balanced financially as what you'd like to be, or most people think you are. And I think that takes away from your ability to actually grow the system or do other things. Right now, you have to catch up to your system. And, I know for working with staff in other communities like this, it's really can make it very stressful when everybody wants everything, but you don't have the ability to actually support it with staff to basically match what people's expectations are. And I think the intent is you have a great system that right now is not as balanced. And I think Louise said it best. It's not as balanced as what everybody would like it to be. And that's an area that is going to take some effort and work to get there. But there's no question you have the talent in your system to do it.
I want to thank you very much for that. And I just want to repeat a question that I asked Luis before when we were planning the agenda for this, which was, and I think it was is sort of parallel to what you asked Marilyn, but more just specifically, do you feel, Luis, that this is a good functional document for what you and your staff need to accomplish in the future? And I already know the answer to that question, but I want you to answer it here, please.
Yeah, no, I do. Again, and I think a lot of the answer is yes. I think if I wasn't around during the steering committees or the strategizing of the RFP, that shaped the outcome of the master plan. Had I been around, maybe some of the questions or the requirements of it would have been different. But I do think it is absolutely the right document for this time. Especially as we consider reevaluating our programs, prioritizing what facilities and at what level we can support them. And I'm talking about parks and recreation centers. And it gives us those tools in order to do that. It gives us, it's something that we can share with staff and their respective programs and divisions to say, okay, this is what we need to be thinking about over the next few years operationally and realistically. So yes, I do feel that there's really good material that's going to lead us through the next years. And anything that comes out of this can be, obviously further studied. It's saying, well, you need a facility, another aquatic facility. That's not going to come out of this study. Where, the size, the location, that's something else. But does it state it in here that we need it and gives us that direction? Absolutely. So the details as to what growth looks like or what expansion looks like would have to be covered and considered separately, but it does cover all those needs. It covers the gaps. It states what the gaps are in our service areas and by location or by geography or just by facility. And I think that gives us enough direction to pursue that further if and when the time comes, which, again, an additional outdoor aquatic facility is right now not in the cards. We see what happens when we try to renovate one, so I think that's why this is a good tool for us to, over the next few years, to target what we do intentionally and achievably.
Thank you.
Yes. I mean, and I don't want to be the only one speaking. So we do have staff, sitting there. If you have any questions, I think Mark probably has been around for several master plans, as has Roger. So, right. So I think he knows as well how we use this, especially this one, the latest one we have, and how we can achieve a lot of the things on there. So, Mark, if you want to say a couple of words to that as well, just so that they don't, just hear from me.
I think probably the best thing about any master plan is it gives us a list of things we need to try to accomplish, whether it be financial or programming or facilities parks. So we've already went through all of the whole implementation chart. So there's 300 and some recommendations in there. Started tagging them. Some of them are done already, 2024, since we've been working on this for a while. Then we're tagging the 2025 ones that might show up in the CIP, or ones that we know are in the 26, 27, 28, 29 CIPs. So we want to make sure all of those are lining up with the city's capital improvement plan. So it becomes an interesting match, because basically all you're doing is taking what's in our master plan, making sure it's in the CIP, and assigning a year to it. So that gives us implementation ability. And, it won't all fit in. There's more money requests than there is money. But it gives us a strategy to start going, okay, everything that we're going to request in the CIP has to be in our master plan. So we've been working on this master plan long enough that we took the CIP and put it in the master plan. So, and then added new. So the new pool. So we want a second pool. Well, where might that show up? We know it's not in the next 3 years. Could it be the 4th year, the 5th year? Maybe. Or it might be year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, but I think it gives us a good strategy. And it not only does the big stuff, but it also does the little stuff, like we know we need to replace the flooring in the Carnegie Building galleries. I mean, it's an $80,000 item. That's in the master plan. So we have to go in our operational budget and go, okay, let's do that in 25 versus replace this playground over here in 25. So I like it. I work off lists all day and every day. So this gives me a really good framework to go, okay, here's the big plan. Let's see what we can accomplish this year. And then as we work on 26 budget, we start going, that one, and that one can fit in really nicely. So I like these. That's why the last one we did, as we went through it year by year, we got to the point where we were pretty significantly complete in the master plan, which is huge. That means we did a plan and we followed it. So that's what I think it's time to renew. We had too much of that completed and it needed to be refreshed. Some of the stuff wasn't doable anymore. So I like where this is going. I mean, it's been a long process getting us here, but I think it's going to be good.
If I may, I will add to the Designing Local. Jasmine's here from Designing Local, which was the component team that focused on arts and culture. I think they did a thorough job of community engagement. I've talked to the Art Commission many times, and I've said when I arrived here in 2015, I kept hearing Lawrence is an arts and culture town, but I kept saying, what does that mean? And nobody could really tell me. This helps sort of define that, but also start to set a trajectory on what have we been doing, and do we want to keep doing that in the future? And if so, how do we do it more intentionally? So I think that's baked into this plan really well. And to Luis's point, how quickly we can implement those things is to be seen. But I believe it's a really solid set of opportunities in there that could really advance Lawrence.
Along those same lines, and again, back to Leon, how does it compare as far as the community participation compared to other communities that you've done something similar with?
Well, I think your participation is really high. I mean, people want more of it. And of course, you're a very, a younger audience because of the university there. And so you get a lot of use and a lot of play. There are some areas within your system that don't have as much use as what the community would like, and you have some spaces that are relatively empty that could be used in the future when you have the right amount of money to do it. But why open up a building if you can't take care of what you already own now? And so I think the ability to recognize that those spaces are available could really even make the community feel a bigger part of the park system. But, right now you've got you have a certain number of staff, and that's what you're going to deal with. But I do think that you have more capacity to offer more program services if given the right staffing.
Another thing I might note too, in the CIP process world, sometimes we have to introduce a project and let it meander through the process for 5 or 6 years before it starts to become something real. So the outdoor pool renovation, we tagged that 6 years ago as, hey, that's going to be coming. So we keep mentioning that every year until we get to the point of, okay, we really need to spend money or we need to close it. So 1, you see it in a master plan. 2, you see it in a CIP. So as we move through process year by year by year, the commissioners start to see, oh yeah, don't forget, we have to fix that pool at some point in time. So I think that's another tool that is a little bit missed sometimes, that we're calling this out 10 years ahead, that all of these things are going to need to happen in the next 10 years. And if the commission pays attention, looks down that list, we want to finish the Lawrence Loop. Okay, if we're going to do that, we have to line out 1, 2, 3, 4 more projects for it to get done. And then that has to get funded in the CIP. So these are all good planning tools, and that's what this whole thing is just a plan. But the harder part's the funding, because we're introducing some fairly new funding mechanisms that we've never done here. So that's getting people to get their heads around, hey, this could be done. It's done in other places. So that's probably the harder thing to do, but Louise is going to take care of that. So.
Vicky has her hand up.
Oh, Vicky.
Yeah, thanks. I think Mark mentioned something that I'm struggling just a bit with on this plan, that reference to 10 years. And I think, I guess I'm not as familiar with how often you do them. And I guess I'm not convinced, given the heavy-handed focus of the executive summary and the overall plan on the financial sustainability, that it's a plan that will cover 10 years. Can you speak to and maybe this is asking too much in terms of prognosticating, but can you speak to the likelihood that it'll be a vital, vision-focused, will have any vision to contribute over a 10-year period?
My opinion of that is basically you do a 10-year plan, and then as you start to get to your 5, 6, 7, you start to look at, is this still viable, or do we need to get to an update to extend us out further? So, sometimes it goes quickly, sometimes it really just gets on the shelf and stalls. So you don't want that plan to happen that way. It needs to get to where we're really implementing it and we're moving through process. But, I've had plans that did both. I've had plans that, we got to year 9 and we look at it and go, we haven't done half the stuff on here. or this past plan, we got to year 6 or 7 and went, yeah, we're moving through this thing really quickly. We probably need to update and include, so we included the arts and culture piece. That wasn't in our last master plan. So those are things that the department's growing in scope. So we need to get it in the plan to figure out how we're going to accomplish that. So 10 years.
And the last plan was in 2017?
Right.
Is that correct?
2017.
So that one, what's that?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. It was
So,
supposed to last long.
so that was 2017, we're 8 years now. This process started about 2 years ago.
Correct.
So that's about a 5-year lifespan, for a plan that was probably supposed to be a 5 to 10 year. I don't think 10 is certainly not a hard and fast number, but that's, but yeah, and we're not waiting to the 10 years because by that time you're behind the 8 ball. So probably, a half a decade of progress until we start looking at, okay, what changes have been made? Because again, it may not be a master plan, but we may have to study other things that come out of this as we move through the process. Feasibility of other, of other facilities, aquatic centers, or how do we expand our system? Some of the suggestions, the developer-funded parks, parks and new developments, right? That could change. If we instill an ordinance that says you will do that, then this changes. And that's just one of the components. That's why this is going to be evolving, I think. If we continue to do these things, not even every financial aspect of this could not happen in a single year. That might take 10 years to go through a few. By the time you go through, the public process and the legal process and all that. So yeah, I don't think that a lot of these things are going to necessarily happen within a shorter period of time, and it would have to be balanced with expectations of the city and its residents over that time. But I think my computer's about to die. So anyway, I don't know. Does that answer your question, Vicky, about the longevity of it and all that? So.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I would say too is this is the first plan that's incorporated our strategic plan. And I think PJ and the group did a good job of earmarking those things that are aligning with the strategic plan. I think that's important for us as staff. One of the things that Louise is currently doing and the executive team is doing is, they're developing a retreat for staff. And part of that is to basically diagnose assess the strategic, or not the strategic plan, some strategic plan stuff, but then also going into the master plan and working in teams. And again, with our strategic plan, we talk about empowering our employees. That's a piece of this too, and bringing them along for the ride. And to the point that it is more of a 5 to 7 year plan, and then we look at adjustments and, and acceptance means this is just accepted and that it's kind of our loose roadmap a little bit. But again, as things change, as we know, we have pandemics and other things that come in that we have to adjust and change to. I'm not hoping that I just jinxed us with anything like that, Vicki, or anybody else. I just know living through that pandemic, it was a big change for everyone. Yeah.
Do you mind speaking to that a little more? My question really is about how the master plan proposed intersects with the strategic plan. I see the chart on page 43 and there are some things named and checked off, but as you look at the strategic plan and the measures of the KPIs, I'm not sure how the punch list of projects are going to impact these measurements of success.
I'll talk to that. Well, and I will say that not every action is going to attach itself to a KPI. It might roll up into another KPI. The level of satisfaction with the park and recreation system is UI1, right? So a lot of these things may not have individual impact, but as they roll up into bigger impacts in our strategic plan. The other thing I want to say is that our strategic plan currently is nearing its 5-year birthday, anniversary, if you will. And that will not necessarily be the strategic plan forever. I'm assuming over the next few years that will be revised, and we want to make sure that even though there's an acknowledgement of our current strategic plan, that there's enough flexibility in there as well that it would shape our next strategic plan as far as parks and recreation and culture is concerned. So I think looking at the bigger KPIs, level of satisfaction, number of people who have attended a specific event or participated, those things are impacted maybe by specific KPIs, but it's the general perception ones about how satisfied are you with this? How satisfied are we with that? If you have a robust park system that has, in neighborhood parks have the playgrounds that they need and they're safe and they're accessible and we have accessible programming, that impacts those higher level KPIs than the very specific ones saying, okay, replace this in this park. Maybe that's not attached to one KPI, but overall, they kind of roll up to some bigger KPIs that talk about satisfaction levels.
And if I can jump in just real quick, Ruth,
Yeah.
I think, I think the punch list maybe that you're referring to is more of the CIP projects and things like that. But I think on the programming side, and especially a lot of what Leon spoke about, that's going to guide us with a lot of the financial cost recovery fees, and that leads to our, sound and fiscal stewardship KPIs and everything related to that. So I think there's going to be a lot of direction for us, more on the programming side when it comes to the cost recovery, and just in time for us to be working on, the 26 budget, and I think it's going to help connect a lot of those.
Oh, great. And just a follow-up to that is, did any of the data that was collected in developing the master plan, get fed into the KPIs for satisfaction, for example, or number of users of certain things or priorities, or are those two data sets separate?
Which,
You mean their
what I
evaluation
mean?
tools?
You're talking about
that they use?
Like the
survey.
UI1, for example, that was last updated in 2022. So in their work, did any of that data get fed into the UI1 measures? Like they were in their public engagement that they undertook?
They did a survey for the master plan, mostly to assess
To build the
community's
master plan?
perspective on Parks and Rec currently and arts and culture.
So that can't really,
That wasn't really jiving directly with KPIs at that stage.
okay, so it's not
But
really,
certainly now, we know what the KPIs are, so we would make sure that, those are measured accordingly.
okay, thank
That
you.
makes sense?
And a little bit to add to that, the city as a whole does the community survey to try to match up the KPIs.
Right.
So is your culture celebrated, all those that
Yeah.
that people need to put their input in. We didn't specifically ask that in this master plan, but the city asked that, and then we report that.
Okay,
So, and that helps inform our programming.
okay,
So they're kind of tied together, but not really. Does that make
okay,
sense?
thanks, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
And then with the future ETC surveys, we're going to change some of those questions, correct?
Right, each time we
To-
do a
yeah.
new survey, then we're re-examining the questions to make sure they're aligning appropriately with the KPIs.
Okay, thanks.
And that way
will
we can-
There are some questions that will remain unchanged, but I think they're
And that's a survey science thing where they have to stay consistent so you can measure against previous
Right.
surveys.
Gotcha, okay.
Benchmark.
and other cities, and under other cities as benchmarks,
Right.
so.
Any other questions out there? Or discussion?
I move that we recommend the city commission to accept this master plan.
This is John Dalbandy, and I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Vicki, you said aye? Okay, great.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you all.
Yeah, great job, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. You don't have to hang on much longer here.
Thanks,
Thank
Leon.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mark.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Jasmine.
much.
Thanks, Hank.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Jasmine. Thanks.
All right, bye. I didn't see Hank until just now. Okay.
We'll let them clear the room, and I think we're ready to go on.
Yeah, so our second item is, on the regular agenda items, is the 2026 budget update.
Louise will speak to it first, I think, so he may share his screen too.
Well, if you have it, you can do that.
I
Because
don't have they have the
Oh, okay.
documents
I'll
in
share
front
it.
of them, but we need to share it for public, so.
Okay, before I do that, I just wanted to give a little bit of a brief update of where we are and then go into how the budget is going to be impacting or potentially impacting Parks and Recreation. But basically, we have been going through a process called Balancing Act, and I've talked to you before. We're going to talk about it again. But so far, the city has created two committees, one made up of citizens, one made up of employees. They have gone through the Balancing Act, and after some questions, and this is along with our budget office and the city manager's office, and they've come up with some recommendations on the Balancing Act. The same exercise was asked of the commissioners. So they've gone through the Balancing Act, and what I placed in front of you, or what Roger placed in front of you, is the outcome of just the commissioners' input of the Balancing Act. And I'm just gonna, well, you know what? I don't need to share my screen, Roger, because you all have hard copies. So I think as Mark goes through what the Balancing Act is, we can talk about these rubrics and how the commissioner's current direction is.
Louise,
you guys can,
you might want to share it just for the people that are watching online. That way they know what they're talking from. That's the only reason why we need to.
understood. Okay, so you gonna allow me to share?
You should be able to share right now.
I'm looking for it here. It's not in its store. Oh, here we go. Oh, geez, hold on. Can you see it all?
Now, yep.
Now we
coming.
can.
It's coming.
Okay, let me just,
There we go.
Great.
okay, make it a little bit bigger for you. All right, so just to explain what this is, the Parks and Recreation are here in red under unmistakable identity. As we know, we have 5 outcomes for the city strategic plan, and most of Parks, Recreation, and Culture lies within unmistakable identity. And within that, we have 11, I believe, funds and programs. We have assessed, the city manager last year and this year has asked us to assess our current program levels, which are in the rubrics that are attached, and as well as once we assess where we currently feel our service levels are, what would it take to move up to higher levels of service and lower levels of service? Higher levels of service, could be the things that are in the master plan. For instance, another outdoor aquatic center, or however it may be. The lowest part is we're just dabbling in these programs and facilities so that we have a full range of what the potential is based on the realities of Lawrence, Kansas, right? We are not going to have the same potential upside as Seattle or Indianapolis, or even Kansas City, which are much bigger. So in the realities of Lawrence, Kansas, what would be a 5 level of service and what would be a 1 level of service? Where do we lie? And what would it take monetarily to go in one direction or the other? So that's what the Balancing Act is based on, is these levels of service and a tolerance and prioritization by the community to tell us, okay, we want you to use your money this, or we're willing to give this up at this time in exchange for, maintaining a level of service in another department. Keeping in mind that this is speaking specifically to the general fund. So this is a shared fund among Parks and Recreation, Police, MSO, Planning and Development. So these are the general funds. So really we are, as much as I'd hate to say this, it's not gonna, I don't mean it the way it sounds, we're competing against each other for the same funds. So if there's a shortage, the practice here is to prioritize what we can do within the constraints of a budget deficit, which is $6.5 million next year. So what you have in front of you, and we don't need to go through all of it right now, I just want to give you an idea of what we have here so that you guys can maybe use it as you do the balancing act, which I'm going to ask Mark to walk through it quickly so you can see it. But this will be maybe a tool for you to give you a little bit more of an idea. But if we go down to this main page, the front page there, this is what the commissioners said they are inclined to say about our budget and how we use our dollars. The blue highlighted numbers is where we've identified our current level of service. Anything outside of that, it means that they're saying, okay, decline or increase that level of service. So we have a lot of 3s, we have a 5 in some of our estimations, and they are saying either, and for the most part, reduce services with just a couple of exceptions. One was aquatics, and the other one was youth and adult sports, where they're saying, don't change what you're doing. So the number 5 means the 5 commissioners all agreed to keep that level of service. The next line for cemetery and levy management, 3 of them said, keep what you're doing. One said, reduce it by 1 level. The next one said, reduce it by 1 level. So in total, there are 5, but there are differing opinions or priorities by those commissioners. So that's what this main sheet is. Just to give you an idea, and it gives you every other fund or every other outcome there as well, so you can compare where they decided to go up. What you will notice is that there are very few, other than just a couple items here, that they said increase the level of service. So this is citywide general fund. Most things, because we know we're in a budget deficit, are going to have to decrease in its service level, right? So that's what this is. Now the next one goes down into our 11 funds, which is how we budget our programs, our facilities, our parks, our trails, etc. So you'll see what I did here is parks and open trails, and I put this in the order of budget size. So our biggest budget is $5.5 million in parks and trail and open space management. Then up on top, this emblem on each of them tells us where we've evaluated our current service levels are. The exercise that we've been asked to do is, okay, if you're going down levels, what does that mean percentage-wise, and what does it mean in service level reduction? And those what the numbers are up on top. So this is 5% less than our $5.5 million budget currently, which is a reduction of $275,000 in our operating budget, and the 20% is $1.1 million reduction, and the same on the reverse. Now, as I mentioned, none of them went up. All of them either stayed the same, a couple of them, or went down at least by 1 or all of the commissioners. So what the circles are, and again, this is for your reference, as so you know where the commission is going, is that one for parks, trails, and open spaces, one of the commissioners say keep it the same. 4 of them said go down to level 2. All right, so if things pan out in the community, this is open to the community now, and this is where I want to invite you to participate, is unless things change severely with the community and they say, no, you're absolutely off, which would then influence potentially the priorities of the commission, this is how they were thinking at the time that they did the balancing act. So again, without going through all of these, I just wanted to give you a good idea. Parks and Recreation, one said to maintain it, or Parks, Trails, and Open Spaces, one said to keep it, four decided that it could lose a little bit of what we're offering. Here is Aquatics, which is 2.2 million budget, which is a large budget for. We assessed that we were in service level 2. And that might seem like it might be a little bit low, but what it would take for us to build another outdoor aquatic center, build neighborhood pools, which is realistic in a community our size, that would take about $2.6 million more, right? So that's why there's many steps above where we are right now, and that email that you received, that some of you received from that are in public comment, tell you this is where we are right now. And we're not fooling ourselves into knowing that we could be providing a lot more, as Leon said, with more funding. But this is the funding where we have right now, limited hours, where, you know, the leisure pool is closed more than we'd like, and we don't have a long a season at the outdoor aquatic pool. So in this one, everybody, all the commissioners said, keep it at 5. Do not touch it. We don't want to go down to 1. And you can see where these changes are. So another example here. So we were, for the golf course, this is the one that I think generally got the biggest reduction, was that everybody said reduce, which was go from what we're doing now to a slighter lower level of service. Right? So that means a 5% reduction in our expenses, which comes out to about $108,000. Then one said, go even further down, right? And reduce $326,000 and give us this. We're fine with this. One person. So again, this is why I gave this to you. So as you go through this, you can take a look and see what it is that the commission is thinking as far as priorities are concerned, understanding that this is now open to the community for their feedback along the same lines. But they don't necessarily see all these numbers that I put on here, what the amount is, until they go through the practice. Then part B of this is, are you willing to increase property taxes in order to not forego as many services? And here's the question, the answer that the commissioners gave. 3 said, no, we want to maintain our property taxes where they are. And 2 said, we're open to increasing them, right? So again, just to give you an idea of where the commissioners are thinking right now, and that's what these are. So what I've asked, what I would like in the last few minutes, I don't want to take up too much time because we're trying to keep these meetings, shorter rather than longer, is for Mark to pull up Balancing Act and just show you how this, how the tool works. If you haven't already done it, I want to encourage you to please do it. Your input does count. And then also to let you know that there are 2 public gatherings at Carnegie where people can do this as a group, ask questions, and have a lot more feedback than you doing it yourself in your house or at your work desk. So there's one tomorrow, 6 to 8 at Carnegie, and then as well on the 19th. So that would be next Wednesday, also 6 to 8 at the Carnegie. So they'll do a group exercise for the Balancing Act if any of you are so inclined to do that instead. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark. And Mark's done this probably more than I have on the Balancing Act, so I think he could drive much better than I can.
So go over here and release the screen. Okay.
And while he's doing that, are there any questions about the rubrics and how those are laid out in front of you?
Go to the screen.
Sure.
What was the question, Louise?
Oh, did any?
No, if anybody had any questions at this point from...
Sorry.
So as you move to the left and you're decreasing the cost of things, are you assuming that, say, the program prices are the same?
Well, so,
I'm looking at recreation,
Yes.
health, and wellness programming, and it looks like, you guys are at a level 3 of service, and 4 of the commissioners are suggesting that there be some cuts.
yes.
Is it also possible to raise revenue to make up that difference?
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. If you go as Mark goes through this, you'll notice we're one of the only departments that when you open up that rubric, and we'll show you how to do that, where it has what our current cost recovery is for some of these programs. Because the city and taxpayers aren't necessarily funding 100% through taxes, right? A lot of it is through user fees. We have that unique ability to create revenue through our programming that most of the other general fund departments do not. So there is that. So the answer to your question is yes, this assumes nothing changes as far as the revenues are concerned, Marilyn, right now. But it gives us the unique opportunity to go to the commission and say, we understand this, but we feel that the community would support this programming at a higher level because it's a nice to have that they're willing to pay. Understanding that we have some essential programs that are going to recover less, so we have that ability, and that will be part of what we do through cost recovery analysis, program evaluations to see, okay, what makes the most sense for us to be able to do and maintain a certain level of service that we otherwise would have to reduce if we didn't consider those other revenue opportunities. So, but when you read this is just working on the expenditure side, Marilyn and everybody else. It's not saying, because, okay, so realistically, if we reduce programs, we are also reducing revenue, right? Because they're revenue producing. So this tool, unfortunately, and I asked early on when we started, does not compensate for that fact, that a reduction. So that is part of our job to try to convey, yes, this is not a priority for you, but we feel we don't have to eliminate these number of services or these services because we're able to still provide them at maybe not 100% recovery, but at 80, at 75. And what we're asking is a commitment from the city for 25% of that funding, and then it's up to us to make sure that we are able to meet those revenue goals. So, and again, it's not about being on the backs of taxpayers or users, but it's about quantifying the value of the services in a way that people are still willing to pay for them and we can still provide them to the community without having to reduce too much. And some will support others that are more critical and may not be fully cost recoverable.
All right, so just showing you the tool. So this is a public engagement tool. So as you look at all of these charts across here, we came up with all those steps. So we said in parks, if we reduce 5%, here's what it would do to us. Or if we reduce 20%, here's what it would do to us. In aquatics, we took a much more hard line that we felt like we were in a basic operation for aquatics. Take one step down, we close aquatics. So we're going to do it or not do it. There's lots of steps we can go up, but there's not many steps to go down for a city our size. So when we start looking through this, here's the whole big game. And I call it a budget game because it feels like that when you're playing it. So you have a $123 million budget in general fund. We know we need to cut 6.5% because the city's last budget, 6.5 million. Yes. City's last budget was not sustainable going forward. So we use fund balance, structural integrity to hold that to where we want it for 25. 26 is not going to work that way. So each one of these, so if we just go straight into ours, up here you can do police and fire. So you can go into each one of those and say, okay, I want to just pick one. I'll do this one. I'm going to decrease it. And I picked up 7,000.
Go into the eye and show him the information button.
Yeah, I will.
The rubric is.
I will.
Oh, okay.
So each one of these, every time you click, you impact the number. So that one's, you save that, and then it tallies. So every time you get to the bottom, you save it. If we jump down to our divisions, so these are all police fire. So if we go in here,
And there's a totality of our budget is $18.9 million.
correct.
General fund dollars.
So every time we change one of these, what we need to do, what everybody should do, which I'm kind of concerned they won't do, is go up here and hit, okay, you can see all these levels, but this tells you what they are. So this shows you this. And then in this one, you have to read this, there's 30% cost recovery on aquatics. So that's where revenue's not tied into this well. So it's.
But they have the notes on there so that it'll give you an idea of what our current levels of recovery are.
Correct. So if we cut aquatics one step, you can see what it does here. So it's closure, but then we go up here to where we want to add a facility. So you saw on here, it's $2.6 million of operating budget. That doesn't build a pool, obviously, that's $23 million. So then you click out of that.
Mark, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
If the pool's in what level, 3 still, 2?
2.
And I'm going to ask this about several of these that have revenue generating opportunities. How's that affect the revenue if it's dropped?
Yep.
From level 3 to level 2 or 2 to 1? What's that percentage in
Yeah, that's where
possibility?
that's where this game doesn't play very well.
Okay.
So in golf particularly, so the first step down is $128,000. Well, did that impact revenue or not? The answer is yes, because we don't have the same number of staff to operate the golf course, but that doesn't tie in here. So it's almost a hole that you can't see.
Right.
So you're fixing the expense side, but you probably made a bigger hole on the revenue side.
Does it affect the cost recovery?
Yes. So that's the problem with this a little bit. It's all expense related because all those other budget divisions really don't account for revenue.
Right.
Or most of them don't. Some of them do. Planning has.
But there is, but I will say there's an understanding certainly by the city manager's office, and I think to the commission to a certain extent that those would have positive impacts on what we would be able to maintain as far as service levels. So that will be part, and that question was asked of the committees, the budget committees, the citizen and employee committee, and I believe the commissioners as well, saying, you know, would you support fees and charges to kind of minimize the impacts? And there was a yes. There's no idea as to what to do, but there is support for that. So that's what we have to do responsibly, absolutely, equitably, and make sure that we don't diminish the opportunities for those who can't afford to participate in our programs and facilities. So that is the second part of this. Right now, it's about the expenditure dollars and that number, but there is a part two, a part for us that we have to work through and once we know where things are settling here.
And that's why, as Mark and Luis were talking about, when you click on the I at the top, we asked if they could add that information where we put the cost recovery, because unfortunately it's not built into the system. We were hoping that it could show a direct revenue cut if you start cutting expenditures, but the software isn't set up that way. So we at least wanted to be able to show somewhere, so hopefully everybody reads that when they say, okay, when you see aquatics, it's 30%, then it's not going to be a direct, you're not going to have all the math, but you're at least going to understand, okay, if I go down a service level, it's clear that we're going to be losing revenue. And so, and some of the other program budgets, that cost recovery is much higher, so, you kind of have to, think through the math yourself, but at least understand that there is going to be a direct correlation. If you drop our budgets, there's mostly revenue tied to it, and so hopefully that helps.
Yeah, so the golf is one because all 5 commissioners said take it down. So if you look at golf, so we took one step down, we saved $108,000, but you have to go up here and and said they went here. If you go here, you're really reducing service. Here, you're not changing a lot, but you're also 80% cost recovery up here, so really you only save $20,000. Well, I know we can increase fees at the golf course to offset $20,000. So that's the back game of this, that you kind of got to, once we get direction, then we'll go back and go, yes, I see people pick that. However, I know we can raise fees and create $100,000 of new revenue. So that's kind of the hard part about this. This just deals with the expense side of it.
But it does give you an insight into commissioner priorities, right? And the public's priorities as well. That's a priority. Now, we can shift that because of what we do as a department. But this is still what they're saying. Absent the revenue side, we want to prioritize these things. And again, they're prioritizing it against all other general fund departments, right? So it's not just within, it's easier for us to see this, but they have to meet $6.5 million in reductions with PD and with planning and development and all the other departments as well. So they're intricately tied together, but we can compensate for some of it and not necessarily, go by the letter of the rubric, especially if we're able to compensate, with revenues that allows us to provide those services, continue to provide them.
So on the other side, on the rec facilities, all 5 commissioners said hold level. If you look in here, you can see why, most likely. Because you can see we have 3 rec centers, we have 2 rec centers, we have 1 rec center. So we went and said, look, if you're going to reduce, we're going to reduce. And so I think all 5 commissioners said, no, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to close a rec center. So therefore, votes all held maintained. Makes sense. Because we can't do half a rec center. We can't just we can reduce hours, but then why do we have it if we're never open? So again, in these, we wrote all of this and gave them the steps down, I guess, or steps up. So some of the commission votes is understandable if they went in and read it and went, oh, no, I'm not going there. So some of them that are a little harder to describe, so the wellness programming. So in this one, it just reduces total number of classes. So that seems harmless unless you're in the 200 classes that got cut. Right, we went from 1,200 to 1,000. So, and as Marilyn said, that's going to start hitting revenue too, because this program's a 60% cost recovery. So again, you cut 100,000, you're not really cutting 100,000 because you're cutting the revenue also.
Yeah, and these will be conversations through the city manager with the commissioners. As again, we're asking here for funding of 40% of this, not 100%, because we're confident, and we're not confident at this point. We have to reanalyze what our true costs are, but we will be doing cost analysis because the way the city budgets, everything gets allocated to the departments and the programs. So we really have to factor the HR staff person who enters, payroll, and we have to, the city attorney's office we get charged a portion. So the true level of cost recoveries might be reduced now that we're going to look at this through that lens. But at the basic number here, when you see 60% recovery in the one we just saw, it means that just by the sheer numbers, the expenses are only 40% compared to are actually only 40% because we are recovering 60%. So we have a little bit more of that work to do as opposed to other departments, because we can tell a story successfully as long as we get the community involved in the outcomes here.
So looking in other departments, you start looking for big numbers. So this is fire suppression. So if I drop that one step, I drop $2.4 million. Now I'm really making headway, right? Well, then you have to look in here and see what you just did, which you hope people look first before they do it. But you know, you're dropping from 4 to 3, so that was a public debate, right? Dropping to 3 firefighters on a truck, blah, blah, blah. So here's what it costs. So it'll be interesting to just see where the community feels is the best versus what the commission feels is the best versus where we end up, so.
Yeah, and with that cover sheet on that stack that I gave you, it can give you an indication, again, even in non-parks functions of where the commissioners were thinking, keep this, reduce this, keep this. And that was 3 weeks ago or so, or yeah, 3 weeks ago or so. So that can change over time, but that was kind of a snapshot at that time.
Anyway, that's a lot of information. Can we answer any questions? I would encourage you to go in and do this. I mean, it's a cool exercise to go through because it's really hard to balance it. Because I cut 1.2 and then I added that, and it's a interesting math problem.
And then the final step is, are you willing to increase property taxes in order to not cut this many? Because you can go, oh yeah, we can increase it all the way. It'll tell you up on the right-hand corner what the median income, medium household increase would be if you did that. So that's the other part, because 2 of the commissioners said, yes, go ahead. I'm willing to consider it. And 3 said, no, keep it the way it is. So, but the community can do that as well. And then I do want to say, just as far as the schedule, the proposed schedule for, I just wrote them down. So it's going to the commission. So July 8th or so is when the recommended city budget should go to the commissioner. The city managers, oh, perfect. There we go.
Ask
July
what you
8th.
shall receive, Louise.
Yeah, so that's the process for now. So between now and July 8th, this is what we will be working on. And of course, there's time between July 8th and September for the actual project. We are way advanced. Normally, we're not even starting this yet, right? This process. This started last year, and we're pushing through it so we can get as many answers, sentiment from the community, the commissioners, and build our 26 looks like earlier, so we can make preparations for 2026 and beyond. So it's a very accelerated speed, but the recommendation still doesn't, or the final adoption isn't until September, just like it normally is. We're just ahead of the game right now.
The balancing act exercise is open the month of February. So if you know people that want to play, get them the link and tell them to get in there.
Yeah,
And we can send you all the link as well.
Yeah, it was on the agenda, and when you open it up, there is a video that kind of walks you through the process too.
So the balancing acts keeps the budget the way it is listed, right? Without any consideration, if they increase property tax, do they have to do the exercise all over again?
Well, it would affect that $6.4 million deficit.
Right.
So that could change the whole number.
So they'd have to do the exercise all over again to identify where that money would go.
No, it would be within the individual program lines, because you don't just change that. They're interdependent. So you can slide that and say, okay, it will give us less of a deficit, which means we can reduce less of the programs.
It's not a linear process.
Okay,
You
so
can
go
jump
across the
around
board.
and do it in whatever order you want.
Okay.
Yep.
You could increase here and then decrease in several areas.
Increase your taxes so you don't have to decrease.
But it does not take into consideration if we increase fees for
No,
individual,
because that's not built into it.
right,
Yep.
okay.
This just
I mean, in my mind, that's part of our answer. Is let's look at fee increases where that makes sense.
Yep.
To offset some of the potential cuts, so.
And understanding that in our case, even though we're talking about fee increases, they may not be used in the same program where the fees are created, right? Again, we want to make sure that we're charging the right amount for the right things, and some may be low, that are going to have very low cost recovery, and those that are, covering higher, we're going to use that revenue to subsidize internally some of those other programs. So it's not necessarily, hey, we're going to raise golf fees and it's going to stay at the golf course. First of all, it goes back to the general fund, just so everybody knows. We're as much as we're sharing the expenses, we're also sharing revenue to the general fund. So how we use that, we can decide that internally in a way that makes the most sense. So it doesn't necessarily stay within the project, within the program, because it can be used in other places for us to be able to continue to provide those services that we think are critical.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate you going through the website and explaining it, because it's a lot to take in. So I feel a lot more confident about poking around in there. Thank you.
And I would say too, if you have people that you want to send this out to, refer them back to this meeting, and we can walk them through this process as well, just by showing this meeting to them as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, the big trick on that is clicking that little I, because then you really understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm afraid some people might just go through and.
Well, there was an email that went out to employees, all employees today, asking them to participate as well. And as it's open to the community, an employee, whether they, just work or live in Lawrence is critical. So in it, they did explain, make sure you click on the blue eye and all that, but it's not intuitive, right? Unless somebody says, do this, you would not know, okay, this is where all the information I really need is, not just the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think it's an open question whether all of the people who use the instrument are going to really take the time to think through the implications. I think there could be a quick sort of, let's slash and burn that, let's pump this up, and I'm just going to manipulate it so it looks the way I want it to.
Well, no, there are definitely people who have preferences, and even employees, they work in a specific department. I can see them doing some self-protection, and saying, hey, no, don't slash here, slash there. But we're not the ultimate decision makers, in it. It will be factored into the commission's decisions in the end. So it really is a holistic approach, not just the community, not just the commissioners, not just the budget committees, the ad hoc ones that have been created, but all of that put together.
Good deal. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. So moving on to reports, director's report.
Okay, I only have a couple of things. One is I want to continue to update you on the pool, on the outdoor pool renovation. In January, there were 2 pop-up events in the Indoor Aquatic Center. And they had, I believe over the 2 days, maybe about 50 participants, but they also opened the survey online. I was thinking earlier today that we should have sent them out to you so you could see them, but basically what we were asking the public to give us feedback on is one of 2 different layouts or shapes and orientation of the shallow pool. There are not too many options, the location is going to be the location, but there were a couple of shapes that we wanted to give the public input on, and they did select one of 70%, over 70% selected option 1, and we can send these to you unless somebody has the ability to pull that up quickly. And then they also prioritized some amenities. The ones that went, that kind of rise to the top was a water bench, a toddler bench, and the sprays, both on the low sprays and high sprays. There will be other things that we go out to the public again on later, which will be the water slide and, some ideas for shade. They did give us feedback as well. They want to prioritize shade and heat management to the extent possible. They're concerned about accessibility, so we will be still talking through that and how to make both the pools, the shallow and the deeper one, more accessible. And then, of course, we're still going to go through the restroom and locker room and entry changes over the next few months. The consultants have started schematic design right now, so we meet with them every other week. And moving this forward, we are expecting at this point that the pool will not be closed until after Labor Day or on Labor Day. We were thinking it would be earlier, but the way the information they're getting about the permitting and going out to bid and how long it should be out on the street, it looks like it'll be after the summer. So we expect to have a full year of aquatics this summer, in spite of a dwindling budget. But that is our plan right now, is Memorial Day to Labor Day for the outdoor aquatic pool. Closed shortly after that. Construction would start shortly after September, maybe October. So that's, as of right now, everything goes as planned. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and maybe we can do this under future agenda items if we get to do that, but the budget was always something that I was going to report on, so that took a big chunk, so I'm not going to report that. So that really is it for me. We will be planning a retreat, as Roger said, for staff. When that's going to happen, it might be at the end of the month, it might be a little later. I think having the budget conversations kind of in our at least more defined is probably a better time to do it, and we're still in the midst of that. So, but we will be doing that. We need to make sure that that we have buy-in and full communication with the entirety of our staff as we go through this process. And so I think that's it. Yeah, that's it for me. If anybody has any questions about anything, I can certainly answer those. No?
See any? Yeah.
Oh, John has his hand up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Luis, where does that resident budget committee that the city created, do you know where they fit into this?
Yeah, they've met several times. They've already done the meeting on January 21st, the commission, they reported, budget office reported on the outcomes, general outcomes from those two committees as well. So that was right after the commission did. So what they presented that day on January 21st has what their input was as well. So they will continue to meet throughout the next 8 months or so, 7 months, while they're still working on the project. So we're not involved. That's budget and strategy and the city manager's office, but they're still being engaged throughout this process. They're not done. They've just done the balancing act, had a couple of meetings around that, but there's still more conversation to go.
any other questions? I don't think so. So then that takes us to board items. Any items that we want to discuss, or yes?
I have, I've been added to a committee it's Municipal Stadium at Hobbs Park Committee.
Oh, yeah.
It's researching the possibility for the stadium in Murphy, Brunswick House to be considered for the historical registry, and that committee will be going to HRC this month, but I think they would like to be added to our agenda, not for any financial, but just support. I think in the March meeting, they'd like to make a presentation. If y'all haven't been to 11th and Delaware, Municipal Stadium at Hobbs Park was built in 1947. Extensively used right now for kickball, but it's already on the state registry. And so I think East Lawrence Neighborhood Association and some other people in the community are looking to possibly get it added to the National Registry. We met with Luis and Lynn Zollner, who's on HRC, and we're just trying to go through the steps of going to HRC, the advisory board, before we go to the commission, and then taking it forward. We don't know anything more than that. We've got some architect people possibly to look into it, but I think that's part of the meeting, that you could all ask questions to that committee at that time.
And and a couple of things, this would definitely be a public-private partnership of some sort. But it does require, because it's a city asset, even though it'll be mostly run by the community and citizens, because it is a city asset, the city commission has to be the one who says, yes, go ahead and pursue placing this on the National Registry. And so the two necessary steps are the HRC, the Historic Reservation Commission, or Historic Resources Commission, I'm sorry, and then Parks and Rec, and then it would go to the commission, I think in April. So the request is to have them present in March, correctly?
Yes, that March 10th meeting.
So I think what it would require would be the board to kind of approve that, that they present to us. And if that's okay with you guys, it certainly is with me, to keep this moving forward. They do have Parks and Rec support, Parks, Rec and Culture support, as well as HRC so far as departments, but we want to make sure that we run it through the advisory boards as well.
Well, any discussion on that? Because I would definitely move to hear this presentation, because I want to hear it. So that'd be a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, March. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted some clarification on how public comment should be handled. In the last month, we received a letter directly from a citizen, and it wasn't clear to me who was going to respond to her, and what, if any, involvement of the advisory board would be in that. So that was a written comment thing. I also wonder if someone comes live and makes a public comment, where does it go from there?
Good question. One of the things, I mean, in terms of the reply back to her, I said I would forward on. We may, I mean, in the future, Lindsay, did you call her personally, or no, you emailed her? Okay. Luis, and I know that, I mean, if we include, I mean, because again, these are
But I would say,
operational things.
just on the high level, so if you do, I'm sure people, many of you, if you haven't already, would receive something. You're on the advisory committee, you know, let me send this to you, on the advisory board. What I would suggest is that copy them in and forward, and say to them, I'm going to forward this to the Parks and Recreation staff who can best respond to this. We are open to that. Roger knows, he gets the general emails. We're responding to emails and phone calls constantly. So I think if you redirect them to us, and certainly copy us, and you can send it to Roger, would be the most appropriate, because he's kind of the receiver of the general emails, and then he distributes them to whoever on staff or is more appropriate to respond to it. So I would say, thank you for your email. Please, I'm sending it to the Parks and Recreation staff. They can respond, and then we will absolutely do that. So that you don't feel the pressure to have to respond to something that you don't. And this was an operational, thing. So I'm not sure. I think our response is, could be, but certainly well received if we're explaining what the situations are. Because mostly they're like, why aren't you open, or whatever the case may be. But I think that would be appropriate, and just forward it to us. We will make sure that we contact them. If they, if by any reason they come back, they never respond, or what, please let me know, because that is, like I said, we are constantly returning emails and phone calls to residents all the time as part of our regular job responsibilities. Then this is, Lisa, does that sound?
Yeah, I guess the other part, and we talked about this extra to this meeting, but that in the case of someone coming and making public comment, well, the staff can't respond to that and still have this meeting be functional. But if we want to, in this exact time point, in where we have this board items, we can take those comments at the beginning of the meeting and say, please, Roger, can you look into this for us and come back next month with an answer? So we're not.
Or it can, yep, or it can be, please call us, we can talk about it at the office without having to wait till the next month. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands we're still accessible. The public comment process should not be the end of a conversation with us if there are concerns. So the encouragement is, yes, please speak to staff. We're not shielded from the public in any way. And certainly don't want to put you in the spot where you feel that you have to respond something that may be out of your realm, but that we will do that. We are and want to remain accessible to the public.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'll wait till then. Ask for other things.
Any other items? I think that's it.
Okay, well, let me just add something for potentially a future a future presentation as well. There's a group, coalition of mountain bikers that Friends of the Caw, Flat, Evergy, Livewell have over the last few years tried to develop a new mountain bike trail called Cameron's Bluff, which is just north of Bircham Park. There is an easement through and just north of Bircham Park that leads to that area of Cameron's Bluff, and which has already been exercised. The city has the rights to that for recreational purposes only, which is something that Flat has requested of us in order to continue to keep that movement of building this bike trail up there going. So they are likely going to want to come and do a presentation about what Cameron's Bluff is, how it fits into, our trail system and to our recreational offerings and all that. I don't know when they will do that, but I know that Sarah Hill Nelson has expressed interest in coming and speaking to us and providing an update as to, what that coalition of bikers wants to do in that area. So if we can maybe add that as a future item, if you all approve that, I don't know when, we will look and see when they think is more appropriate, but I wanted to see if you as a board were open to that presentation as well.
Yeah, that's right up my alley, but yeah, sure. Definitely
Okay.
interested in hearing that.
Does that the trail they're talking about, would that parallel the river and go?
The easement does.
I'm sorry?
The easement does, but yes, it's up on, I don't know, Mark, how would you describe that? It's up near the 70, but it does, the easement goes up the river, alongside the river.
Does it go through those homeless camps?
So basically, it extends from Bircham Park all the way north along the river up to the Turnpike Bridge.
You're gonna run into some problems, man.
Potentially.
On the west bank of the.
West bank of the river, yes. Yeah,
You're gonna run into some
this is all
problems.
running through a private property, but the easement's on the private property.
And the easement is already executed. All we need to do is make sure that we abide by the requirements in the ordinance, that it be maintained just for recreational use.
It may
No
be,
utilities easement.
it may be legal, but.
Oh, yeah. And it may not be even short-term, John. I just, this may be a while before we get there, but I think the more public that, and I think they did get a grant to do a feasibility study of that trail system, and part of that was public engagement. So this is part of their continuing to have the conversation. It does not mean we're going to be doing that anytime really soon, and we'd have to be sensitive to anything that is an obstacle to get to that. So. But it is, the one request, the last request that they had made to us in writing is that the city exercise on it. We went to legal, they did their final review and said, it's already done, we don't need to do anything else. So the conversations can continue to happen knowing that that's already done. But it doesn't obligate us to anything at this point, just giving them more information that you can move forward with your planning, communication, and see how, how this is developed. So that's it.
Okay.
One other thing, I did send you all the public engagement for the Outdoor Aquatic Center, the results, so you should have that in your mailbox.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, is that, well, so a future event agenda items is Vicky possibly doing a presentation on health department data. That's for, as it goes. And our next meeting will be Monday, March 10th at 5:30, right here.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
That's it. So, anything? Or shall we ask for an adjournment? I would ask for an adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Date, different month.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, same date,
February
different
and
month.
March are
Louise, get better, man.